Okay, I think we're live now.
Yep.
Right. Hello everyone. This stream it's a bit different from the last one because the last one it was sort of a history of empires and civilizations stream. This one's a bit more of a not so much history. This is more current affairs one, and this is about the war on the police. And I'm joined today by Professional Reality.
Hi. I'm just from Southwest England, really. I've been into politics for a bit, but I'm still at college at the moment, so I'm not exactly as read up, but I'm learning.
Oh,
It's the
that's
only way
good.
to put it.
And uh, have you got plans to go to university after college?
Yeah, I'm looking at going and doing a politics degree and then eventually working. Well, basically, my theory is to go back into the institutions, find
Yeah.
a way to at least take back some part of it because I feel like that's the only way we can reverse what's going on at the moment.
Yes, I agree. That sort of because obviously, I mean, I've been talking about it. That sort of I guess it's a sort of entry, sort of like our own little subversive tactic. I've been talking about it by with a couple of conservative lot and a few um Twitter followers. I think one was like a conservative journalist for is it Mallard or something like that. He was saying that's that sort of Machiavellian bit is fine, but what how can you um do it without um I guess you sort of people catching on to your game. Um, and that's sort of the bit I've been wondering because I was thinking, it would be interesting to see if somebody could enter the sort of political institution of some sort, or even into politics, and have like um, this sort of not saying like two face, but these two personas. You got your public sort of persona where you sort of down with the the politically correct talking points and all the culturally acceptable stuff we have today, but in private and striving for the your real values of basically undermining that public face you put on.
Yeah, I think really we need to learn from Tony Blair
Yeah.
because he came across as the moderate centrist, but when you look at his record of all of the things he managed to change, that's the method we need to follow. We don't need to show our hand just yet.
No. Um, I think I think if we look at the way that the left have, and this goes back to what I said, I think in the previous stream, is the long march through the institutions, which I think more people are becoming more aware now. Ever since and P Man was saying this, since the 50s, so right after the war, that um, the Soviet Union would sponsor uh, communists or just in general leftists who would be the quote unquote useful idiots to enter institutions like the universities, like the civil service, like with Burgess and Maclean, who I don't know if you ever heard of. These were the Cambridge, I think it was Cambridge 8 or Cambridge 6 or 8, and these were a group who worked in MI5 effectively, but were actually spies working for the Soviet Union.
I do think a lot of people are becoming awake to Yuri
Yeah.
Bezmenov when he was talking about subversion.
Yes. And those interviews were done, I think, back in the 90s. It looks like they were sort of done quite so many decades ago.
Yeah,
And he's just sort of sitting there, sort of. He's sort of laughing in the interview with the sort of have a sort of giggle with the um interviewer because the interviewer at the time is sort of skeptical, like saying, "Really, is this happening?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, it's happening." I mean, most, what amazed me is if you look at the budgeting of the KGB budgeting, most of it went towards what he said, which was subversion of Western institutions, getting those people in there and getting them to enact the Marxist-Leninist policies.
Yeah, I think he's laughing a lot in those interviews because he can see how stupid the current, like at the time, the Western society hadn't caught on at all. And I think he understood that he was in a way sort of talking to a brick wall. Because I've seen when he have you seen the part when he lectures to the group? He's like writing on a board, lecturing to like a group of Americans, and they're laughing at it because they just don't believe it.
Yeah, I've seen that bit. The first bit I've seen was the interview. I think one-on-one interview, and I've seen a bit of that the group one where when he was writing on the board about how the the KGB would go about the infiltration. Um, yeah, I think it's very interesting because it has this. I don't know if you're well versed with Star Wars. Um, how well
I've
well versed are you well versed with Star Wars at all?
I've watched the prequels and the originals, but when the new ones came out, I couldn't bear them.
No. One thing that's really fascinating, and it's sort of like I don't know if you've seen like recent AA streams and AA's like Twitter um tweeting this is probably about several months ago of Star Wars and everything, and he sort of went through a Star Wars phase,
Yeah,
and then because obviously I follow him on Twitter, so I also joined in the Star Wars thing. We had a bit of disagreement, um, and one thing that really was funny, and this is one thing I think that George Lucas missed a trick with, is that in many ways he was sort of telling the story of the communist subversion in the prequels, because if you look at in the Star Wars bit, you have you have something like the Sith, and
yeah,
they infiltrate the Republic. Or when I say they, I mean you have the followers, but you have the main man who's the Sith himself, which is Palpatine, and he infiltrates the Republic. He works through the institutions, so he comes across as this very much this, oh yeah, I'm 100% on board with the Republic and its values, but really he is part of that Sith group that's there to subvert it and ultimately take it over. And I think in the Star Wars universe, it takes him about um, I think it's about 20, 30 years. It's some time that takes him to reach the goal that he ultimately does in episode 3, where he effectively takes over, he wipes out the remaining opponents like the Jedi and all that sort of stuff, and enacts the Galactic Empire. But one thing I always really find with the when it comes to Yuri Bezmenov or any other, because there's also I think it's a new book actually called the March of the Institutions, or it's like a rewrite, which I saw being promoted the other day, and I'll see if I can find it at the end of the stream because I'll link it in to people. But it seems that there seems to be this very similar sort of tactic where there is this infiltration, as we said, that has taken place, but people are not aware of it because it sounds too outlandish to be true.
yeah, definitely. But do you think? Would you say the stuff going on now with Black Lives Matter? Would you say that's their Order 66, or do you think it's still
I,
ongoing? I think
I
they've
think
shown their hand.
I think they unfortunately, and this is unfortunate. Palpatine, let's be honest, Palpatine would be a conservative. He would be literally a Tory, and that
Yeah,
would make him effective. The problem with Black Lives Matter and communists is that they are run by they let their the ideology itself, it basically turns them into idiots, and not just because I don't want to just be chucking word idiot around loosely, because of the ideology, all they and anything that they would see, so everything that they you know, their view through the world is basically okay. Everything that the end goal is this utopian communist society, right?
Yeah.
So everything before that is not just perceived to be wrong. So like imperialism, everything like capitalism, it's a complete evil because it stands in the way of that utopian society which they constantly seek. And so they've been working for 50 years to enact the perfect society. But the problem I've seen is the communists of the 50s to the communists Black Lives Matter, Antifa lot today are extremely different in how they would go about behaving themselves and how they would go about even I think probably with policies as well because I think I've noticed that there is a difference between your your sort of smartly dressed union leftists back in the 50s to your pink haired um, you know fat pride LGBT everything under the sun sort of leftists today, and I think Black Lives Matter it very much is an American um, movement because with America, America's very unique because they don't have like uh, this is something I've been thinking about. I don't want to say class. It's like class, but for them, the class um, problem, and I put quote unquote problem because I don't. I'm not too well versed in American society and politics to talk about this in detail, but for me, from what I can see as an outside observer, that there is the class problem doesn't exist as much because it's sort of um, intermixed with the race problem, um, and racial quote unquote racial divisions. So when it comes to talking points like like in this country we had Corbyn and talking about race, sorry, class difference. But in America, you don't hear like the Democrats or the lefts really talking about class, and when they do, it's usually delves into racial divisions of how white privilege and all that sort of stuff. And so that's why Black Lives Matter is very much an imported sort of alien philosophy that's been brought over to this country.
Yeah. I think as well class is more, it's not a socio-economic issue as such anymore. I think it's more cultural
I
because
think it is,
they're,
yeah, it's cultural. It's cultural.
yeah, definitely. And I just think that these like communists now, that's the only way to put them. They believe that they're working class, but they don't have the awareness that they've gone through the universities. They are middle class. They are the privilege that they spout. They have the backing.
Yes. Um, well, the interesting thing is there's the I, 'cause I mean I always one of the things that I've is a sort of phrase I've been hearing more and more while looking into the sort of the left in this country is going back to Karl Marx. Now, when Karl Marx, I don't know if you probably you did a lot. I don't know people out there who didn't know, and I don't know if you know about this, but Karl Marx obviously lived in this country some time after
Yeah.
he'd been kicked out. But he said, and I wasn't aware of this, but he always believed the revolution, the revolution would take place in Britain, um, and it never did. And there are probably a great deal of reasons why it never did. I think probably because when he was here, there was a series of voter and electoral reforms where there was greater participation from the British public, for the British public or British men, I should say, at the time, from all social economic backgrounds to vote. So it wasn't you didn't have just to be a landowner, or you could be a tenant. Also, domestic servants would be male domestic servants were also given the rights to vote. So there was a great deal. So it's sort of the sort of argument of the oppressed class couldn't really be played out when voting rights were effectively be given equal across the land. But um, and one of the quotes I've been hearing is that, yeah, the left, or the academic left, have always been disappointed in the working classes of this country because they never do what they're told. They never do what they're told.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially after Brexit, after the last election. The
Yeah.
FBP people came out on Twitter and were saying, "Oh, you're stupid. Why have you voted for the Tories? You're stupid." Not, "Why have we just lost our main voter base in the north?" It was just, "It can't be us. It must be your stupidity."
Well, I mean, it was amazing because I remember there was like all these people like in the Guardian, and they said the FBs on Twitter, who would, they would say, well, if you look at this statistic, it does show that there has been since Blair's time gradual decline in Labour vote share in north of England, and it was just like, dipshits. Tony Blair's seat of Sedgefield went Conservative, and yeah, Sedgefield used to return like 65% Labour vote share, 65%. So yeah, you don't tell me that this is like a perfectly normal sort of thing for this to happen. It isn't. I mean, their losses at the last election display not only that the party has not just alienated but completely um you know excluded their traditional voter base. But from where I'm sitting, the Labour Party is effectively the university town and inner city middle class party.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's
Their
that
only gain was Putney.
Yeah, the only game was Putney, and to be fair, I did like I think the only people that did surprise me was Novara Media, and Novara Media they are well, I imagine you got your Ash Sarkars, you got your Aaron Bastanis, and all that, who are the sort of figureheads um of the well, it's not really a paper, it's an online paper or something like that. I don't I don't know what to be honest, I couldn't even describe it because they have like these regular appearances on BBC and Sky and everything. So um and Novara Media did a stream where they sort of went through the reasons why they left, and to be fair, at first they were, you had there was one meme that I think that Ash Sarkar shared, was basically, I think it was like Avengers, and um uh, it was one of the scenes where basically, it was said, did you win, and it's like, um, we won Putney, but at the cost of everything. So it was some sort of meme, and I thought it was rather funny because they were actually quite self aware of their winning was, Putney and Canterbury, but everything else that no, they just lost. So I thought that was quite funny. Um, and when they got into the stream, they sort of went into the deeper reasons of why they lost, and they basically came to the conclusion that they the situation in North of England was worse than they thought, and they need basically shit ton more of re-education. And they were talking to a Labour MP who was a Corbynite MP, and I think his name was Ian. What was it? Um, uh, just trying to see what Labour. Ian. I think it was Ian Austin. Is it Ian Austin? No, it's not Ian Austin. Uh, Ian Lavery, and basically Ian Lavery went on the sort of a typical leftist mantra of saying, um, I'm in a constituency where it's great we have all these Indians and people from all other, parts of the world, and it's greatly diverse, and that's the problem. These northern constituencies aren't diverse enough. and and they obviously haven't learned their lesson. at all.
Yeah, you can just see Navarro media's response to the Black Lives Matter protests. They're not just supporting it; they're
No.
supporting abolitionist movements,
Yes.
which is just there is. Firstly, there is no reason for them to have a Black Lives Matter movement in Britain in the first place. But to argue to defund British police is just ridiculous at this point.
Well, actually, that was the thing. I say if we sort of go back into the uh, war on the police, and probably this is a good place to start. Is what, as you said, it, and this is the article written by Connor Woodman, and it's on Navarro. So you type in Navarro Media Police. Any guys on the stream, you probably see the you see this, and basically, the article is why do the police exist? And this article was done 7 days ago, so it was done on the 20th of June, and it's very much from what because I read the article and probably just go through a bit of it, but from what I can get, the summary is they want to. It's basically soft abolish the police. They don't go full on like in America, leftists in America have gone to, where it's abolish the police and everything else. But they sort of painting this picture, which I think they will go into abolish the police later down the road. But they're painting this picture of here is the reason why the police were created, and the police were created to as well as one as slave catchers, two to be used against the Irish, and promote the sort of imperialism, and then three was to uh, abuse and working classes, and they sort of start referencing um, the Peterloo massacre in 1818, and then they go on to they then go on to policing in the US. So it's a very the article very much jumps around, and it doesn't make any really coherent sense, um, or any sort of sense really that I can see. And so the first thing that that has to be said is number one, um, the colonial Ireland period. So they're looking at about 1829, um, and the foundation. The 18 sorry, they're looking at 1829 and 1818. Um, but it's important to remember the police weren't created until 1829 by Robert Peel, and that was the Metropolitan Police. And the reason the Metropolitan Police were created was because of the fear from government that situations where you would have massacres like the Peterloo massacre of 1818 would occur, because you would constantly, whenever you had civil disorder or needs to police a populated area, relying on the army may not be the best course of action. It has nothing to do with um, enforcing slavery where the police didn't exist at that point, or crushing the working classes, because the police were, generally came from those same groups of people that they would police.
Yeah, I think it's just the prime example of when leftists change the rules in order to
Yeah.
fit their narrative. So they've started this article off by stating the rules of the game. And then after this, I expect they're just going to write accordingly, even though they've completely missed the definition.
Yes.
And it's the same with many leftists. Like have you seen the Vaush versus Dankler debate? When he said you cannot know someone's true ideas. So even
Yeah.
if you prove you're not a racist, you're still a racist.
Well, yes. Because Vaush has the monopoly on truth, and this is the thing, because leftists, part of the leftist communist theory is because for them they're creating the utopia. So anything before it, any sort of idea or people who don't follow it, they are evil because they know they're evil. Anything beyond thinking beyond the utopia is also evil because the Valsh and the people at Navarre Media, they're creating the perfect society, the society that can never go wrong. This is why people like Valsh, when you would state to him, okay, well, what about the Ukrainians in the Soviet Union? What about currently in Venezuela with the population there, or the Great Leap Forward in China? Millions upon millions have died and perished because of this ridiculous ideology, and for them it's either, well, that wasn't done properly because of this reason, or the reason this has happened is because some other foreign group was interfering, and they have this ridiculous long list of excuses. But the one thing they will never ever entertain is maybe, just maybe, their ideology and the way they see the world is completely wrong, and that and those and they're um they're just too blind to see their that the well I think their ideology blinds them to such an extent that they fail to even see what your average person would see when looking at these examples.
Yeah, I think especially recently they've divulged into, now they no longer deal with facts. You can tell them all the facts in the world. They only speak in rhetoric.
Yes.
They only have their slogans, their catchy sayings, like Black Lives Matter. All lives won't matter until Black Lives Matter. Instead of actually dealing with the facts behind the whole movement, they'll
Yes.
carry on spitting out the same rhetoric over and over.
Yes. And at this moment in time, there's because if we because you've got the article here with Navarre Media, and this is obviously extreme is the war on the police, and I think it's also worth talking about the situations we've seen in the capital with the protests that have gone on there, and how probably talk about the first week. Now, the first week of the protests, um, it was the scenes where you had that police officer who fell from her horse, where it was claimed that she went into a traffic light, though it did look like a brick um, hit her. So I don't know if how she came off the horse, but from the footages that I've seen, it does seem that the things were being chucked like bottles and bricks and such. So I don't know how that particular incident, but that seemed to be the one that um, sort of summed up the policing um, after by the media after the riot took place, and of course you had the um, vandalism of Churchill, of many statues there in Westminster in Parliament Square, and of course you had the um, chap who tried to set fire to the flag at the cenotaph while the police were standing there, um, trying to talk him down, not doing what I would expect them to do, was basically get out the truncheons, whack him across the legs, and drop the little cunt on the floor. No, so there was this um, sort of lack of policing, which towards the Black Lives Matter protesters, which I found very interesting, because I thought the police would go in a bit harder than they did.
Yeah, I think they had the chance to just disperse the crowds completely
Yeah,
because we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, so that would have been a viable excuse. for them to disperse it, but instead they allowed it. And if anyone is in any doubt that they've taken over the institutions, just look at the police response to these protests and the media's response as well. Mostly peaceful, but 27 injured.
Yeah,
it just sums it all up.
I mean, I think the sad thing especially for the Met, is one of the biggest enemies to the Met is the senior officers in the Met itself, because you've had on. I mean, I would recommend people to go over and listen to Talk Radio, because there's been a few um, chief inspectors and former police officers who are regulars there when it comes to policing matters, and they're very critical of the current structure in the Met. And from what they are claiming, now I'm not in the police force, so I couldn't verify this, but from what they're claiming, there seems to be this fear around policing the black community in London, um, to how they should be policed. Now, obviously the sort of usual example that you see of saying the Met Police are racist, from your Lammies and Diane Abbotts and all that, is of course stop and search, and the reason why the stop and searches take place, and they have taken place, is because, and this is look at the statistics on this. I think it's like some ridiculous, like 80-90% gangs in London are black or Asian or part of the BAME people. Now, that number is the reason why the police do the stop and searches. And also, you look at the plate. If you go to a neighbourhood, say like Brixton or Clapham, and you do a stop and search there, you're more likely to stop and search, again, someone from black or Asian background, because that is the majority demographic that live in those areas.
Yeah, I think to claim that the stop and search was racist was just ridiculous, because if members of the black community are disproportionately more poor, that means they're disproportionately more likely to go into gangs. And you can't deny the massive gang problem in the black community. So to stop, I've seen a few articles, people like condemning stop and search, saying that it needs to be stopped.
Yeah,
it shouldn't. It should be increased, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was just gonna. I will see if I can put it in the comments in a bit. But there was a video going round of this lady who was shouting at these police officers in London. I think about a couple of days ago, we're doing a stop and search on this black teenager, and she was shouting like, racist and all that sort of stuff, and why are you doing this to him and everything. And it was this real, proper real Karen type who was having this. She was letting full rip at them, and this police officer, he just pulls out a knife from the guy's pocket, and it was like, yeah, this is why I'm doing it. And you could see the frustration in the police's eyes. Like, he looked absolutely pissed off. And I don't blame him, because, I mean, imagine having some absolute middle class Karen, from a coffee from Pretz and all that, walking up to the police officers and basically saying, "Oh, why are you arresting him? Oh, you're racist." And it's like, that police officer, he wanted to tell her to go fuck herself. Like, you can see it in his eyes, but he knew that he couldn't. But it's like he, he knew that he number one, he knew that this guy had a knife on him, because obviously, from what I could see in the video, he sort of knew him or knew of him. That and I'm just trying to find the video. Just trying to find the video now of the stop and search. Looking on YouTube actually for it.
Well, going back to that Karen, you can you can see that she's complaining because she's not going to be on the receiving end of that knife. It's most likely going to be other poorer people, which will disproportionately be black. But again, that
Yeah.
will be blamed on the system.
Well, I mean that's the one thing that you know that doesn't really understand that I understand about Black Lives Matter, especially those like that, the Karen and the other sort of white middle class lot in Bristol and London, is if you really did care about Black Lives Matter, then you would find a way to get on top of the gang crimes that exist in both cities because um you know ever since Sadiq Khan had taken over as mayor, you usually hear about or see in articles on weekly about um, black kids and black teenagers, and it's getting younger as well. So it's going into like your tens and your twelves of who are being stabbed or even involved in drive-by shootings. I mean, there've been several instances where you had drive-by shootings between gangs. Now, you would think if you really care about Black Lives Matter, you would be on the ball um, with that, and you'd be talking about why uh, there is a gang problem in those communities, and a big reason for that is, of course, fatherless households.
Yeah, most definitely.
Uh,
I think it's not this problem of stabbings. I know the media portrays it as just a London issue, but it happens in Bristol too. I think a few months back, some 18-year-old was stabbed by a kid that was 15, killed by a 15-year-old,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
goes
and
under the radar.
it does go on. It does go under the radar. But I mean, and this is sort of. I mean, I don't. Have you been to London at all recently?
Not recently, not in the last year.
No, because I went about a year ago, and there is this. The interesting thing about London is that the I guess you say the diverse areas of London are very much on the outer boroughs, and then of course further you get into central London, you then go into and you go into like your Chelseas and your areas and your Fulhams and all that sort of stuff, and you go into the posher areas. And these are sort of places that would be where your Karens come from, and your Lib Dem, Remainer, FBEs, coffee pret drinking people, and these sorts of people, the ones that scream about diversity and Black Lives Matter, live in the most homogenous um, district or boroughs in London. I mean, like Richmond, it's like that's like what that's where um, that's where you have your Lib Dems and one of the most Remain areas in London. It's like was it 96% white or something like that. It's absolutely for London. It's very much unique in that regard.
Yeah, I think if they had to experience real diversity, they would understand the grievances of a lot of working class people. Like, look at cities like Peterborough. They've been devastated by immigration.
Yeah,
Their whole communities have been destroyed because they've been forced out by migrants.
yeah. But I have this theory that because the only contact that these people in I said in the sense the Karens and the Remainers sort of prep drinkers would have with um migrants and diverse people is when they're working in restaurants as waiters, working as street cleaners, or working in these sort of low grade job roles. And so for them, because I always get the feeling that the Remain like I don't know if we'll talk about on Question Time on the last stream, that woman in the Question Time audience who put her hand up and said, if we don't have free movement of people, who's going to be serving my coffee at Pret? And she said that unironically. But I remember watching. I remember laughing out loud because I thought she was some like troll who was just there to make them all look bad. But no, she was actually dead serious about it, which was amazing in itself. But there seems to be this very classist, um, I guess you could say, like the most extreme when it comes to classist attitude towards um, those people, the sort of you know diverse people who because they have this sort of preconceived notion that well these people are will be serving us in these sort of roles in society, and that's all they're going to be doing. Um,
Yeah, it's
and yeah, uh,
paternalistic, I'd say.
yeah, yeah, and you can you can say imagine what the response would be from a stabbing, say a murder, uh, like a murder in Brixton, so it's like so like a mugging murder, um, and then compare that to what would the same crime if it was committed, say, in Chelsea or in Richmond, in the more sort of Remainer, uh, um, white and middle class areas, and just see what the response would be, both locally but also response culturally via the media and politicians. Because I think you would have a more, I think especially for the media, you would have a much more over the top response if it say it happened in one of those like like Richmond, one of the posh and middle class white areas. Um, than you would do, because I think there's definitely this level of complacency when it comes when they think, oh, we're stabbing in Brixton or Clapham or so, or Hackney, or yeah, it was part and parcel. It's level of complacency.
Yeah, I think a good example of this in action is, have you seen in Minneapolis? So the councillors voted to defund the police,
Yeah,
and they've
defund the
had to
police.
and they've had to hire private security,
Yeah,
which is it shows that they don't practice what they preach. It's one rule for thee.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to I think Joe Rogan. He been pointing this out about how the people who don't want a wall, but and who are also happy to allow anyone to cross the border, no border checks, no borders at all, are the same people who live in gated communities.
Yeah, I just it's got to the point where you can't decide what's trolling and what's real.
No, you can't.
They've become so ridiculous.
And of course, also also going back to and we're going back to the police, the war on the police aspect in this country. Um, Obviously, you had the riots. The response was, you know, the and bearing in mind this, the first week of the disorder, because of course you had the rioting and the vandalism in London, but in Bristol, it sort of took a very different turn where you had a mob of communist thugs um, managing to take down obviously the statue of Edward Colston. And I know where the statue is because I actually did some work at one of the theatre halls there, which was right next to the Edward Colston statue. So I know exactly where it was. Um, and I know exactly the route that they took to the docks where they chucked it in as well. And they they rolled the statue quite a distance to get to the dock, so they were not stopped, they weren't the police didn't interfere. And the and one thing that none of it makes sense is, number one, they managed to have the first of all, they were able to bring the statue down without any police presence. In the footage, I don't know if you've seen the footage, Professional
No,
Rarity, but I haven't
I
seen
haven't
any
seen any
police
police.
officers. No, I haven't seen any police officers present. Um, and I've been trying to scour through some clips the other day to on Twitter and such, and because what happened was they pulled the statue down, they jumped on top of it and they spray painted it and they sort of stood on it and all that sort of stuff. And again, these were all white urban revolutionary, People's Republican Guards of Stokes Croft types. And they rolled the statue down this road toward the docks. And for those who aren't familiar with Bristol, this was a city centre main road. They were rolling it down, so this wasn't like a side road or anything. Because the roads to the these sort of roads that go towards the docks and everything, these are main roads. They have bus routes, they have cycle paths and everything. So the police must have been aware. We know that they were aware because after the statue was chucked in and everything, um, the media were there, all lined up for the perfect shot and everything, and the police afterwards, the police officer in charge, basically said that, well, we didn't want to intervene because we didn't want to make it violent, but also we understand the um, emotions of the protesters, and basically, he went on to say that he um, agreed that this sort of thing needs to happen in Bristol, and
What
that point, and he basically condoned the act in on itself.
what I couldn't understand is the way the protesters spoke about it. Because I'm from the area, I'm not sure if you saw it from other people that were there, but they spoke about it as if they had always had a grievance with Colston, when before no one in the
Yeah.
circles that I know ever mentioned him. Not
No,
as a slave trader, not as a person.
I knew the statue because I recognised it. Because as I said, I worked at a property next to it when I was at college, and I remember the statue because there are some like benches around there, and I think I had one of my when I had my break, I had one of my packed lunch in that sort of park area where it sits. So I remember the statue vaguely. Um, there was no one thing that was amazing was the people that were being interviewed who were taking part. Um, either had no idea who Colston was, apart from his name was Colston and that he was a slave trader, but they knew nothing else about him. They weren't able to really, declare that. Okay, what did he, what contributions he made to Bristol in the way of financial or properties? Or they knew seemed to know nothing about it. They also didn't seem to know what sort of time period he conduct when he was around with the slave trade in Bristol. There seemed to be some people that suggested that it was you know it went from 18th century to 17th century, so they really weren't aware of who this person was, and yet they seemed to believe he was. It was this unbearable statue. There was this unbearable statue of him, sitting there that was causing so much of a problem, an effect on their lives. Um, and it's just bollocks. Absolutely bollocks.
Yeah, I to me it seems like it was just a publicity stunt. It was just to get attention, put the protesters in Bristol on the map. It wasn't because they actually had a grievance against a
No,
piece of metal. It was
no,
purely for optics.
yeah, and it was all. If you look at the footage, like look at the main like the BBC and your Sky and your ITV and the reporting, and even on American news channels, the camera people that were there who filmed it, it was like a professional setup. It was a professional setup. Had them all in place. They had all the perfect shots of like the moment when they chucked him into the harbour, the moment they pulled him down and rolling him. I mean, it was like it was it was very reminiscent of actually the Saddam Hussein statue when that was pulled down. Um, and Sorry, hang on a sec.
But yeah, I just think that image as well of the black guy kneeling on Colston's neck was posted everywhere. I don't think many people haven't seen that photo. That just shows that they stopped, had enough time for a photo op, and it just shows that they're still just pushing the narrative, not because of virtuous reason against Colston, but to be part of the imported issue that is George Floyd's killing.
Yes. So I've just come back and yeah, my dog was barking at the door. Um, but yeah, it was very much linked directly to um, American-based identity politics, and to such an extent that the removal of the statue, Colston, inspired the other destruction of statues in the United States, because it was very heavily reported on the United States on CNN and NSNBC and Fox and such, that it inspired elements of copycat statues. And of course, the the following week, in this country, you had, you know, suddenly statues across the country were being targeted. Now, where I used to live in Devon, we're in the area where Sir Francis Drake came from, and there's several statues in Plymouth and Tavistock and a few other places around Devon. And of course, he's famous because he was an explorer. He would he was, of course, had a very close relationship with Queen Elizabeth I, and he'd raid and plunder Spanish ships, and of course he was involved in the famous battle against the Spanish Armada.
Yeah. Did you also see? I think the one that most annoyed me was the guy who set up the scouts. I can't remember his name, but
Yeah, that was uh, Scout. I know who you mean, and yeah, that was it. It was Robert Baden-Powell,
oh yeah,
or Baron Baden-Powell, um, and yeah, he set up the Scouts, and he had no link to slave trade, because obviously when he was born and when he was around, it was a couple hundred years since the end of slavery, so he had nothing to do with the slave trade at all. But his crime was that he um, lived in South Africa, and he sent a couple of letters that in itself was praising the Nazi Germany during the war,
yeah,
or sorry, just before the war. Um, Nobody knew before the war what the Nazi Germany was like. The Nazi swastika didn't have the meaning that it would have today. Things like the Holocaust and things which are ingrained in culture and society today didn't exist before. So for them, like the Hitler salute, the swastika, it was just a meaningless symbol, state symbol of Germany. It didn't have that sort of um, political or cultural leverage that it has today. Yet, because he did that, he became, it was the eye of the storm. But the locals weren't having any of it.
yeah. I thought that was quite. It's quite good that they took such a strong stand that they did. I've
Yeah,
that old guy who was saying I'll fight them. That was quite funny to watch.
yeah. But that is the right response, because ultimately these guys, these Black Lives Matter lot and the Antifa, they're bullies.
Yeah,
And I think one thing that's been really interesting is when you've been seeing this in America or France, and this is going to the following week, where you had the Football Alliance and the Patriots on our side, who went there to defend the statues in London. Now, if you think about America and France, they didn't have the um, the sort of counter protesters, visible or very public. But you did have it in this country, and it definitely, um, you know, going to the police point of view, the policing point of view, because it's been talked about, and I definitely see that when you had the protests on the second week, policing, the Met Police were definitely prepared for it, more prepared this time, but they also were, policing methods were very different for either group. So the Patriot side, they were definitely more aggressive. I don't think there's any shadow of doubt that there was definitely more aggressive. They were more prone to pull their batons out and physically intervene than they would for the Black Lives Matters lot. Because if you compare footage, in the Black Lives Matter lot, there were several cases where there were individuals who were being attacked by the mob, and it took the police. If the police were to intervene, they'd sort of push their way through and grab the person and pull them out, but you wouldn't actually see them engage with the violent mob like they would have done with the counter protesters.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of failures, especially on that weekend. Firstly, they separated the veterans with the football lads, which
Yeah,
created unnecessary tension. Now, the football lads shouldn't have started fighting
no,
with the police, but what was wrong with the football lads being mixed with veterans? And another thing, they let the Black Lives Matter. So I was watching it live on the Sun, and they let the
yeah,
Black Lives Matter people walk to Trafalgar Square,
yeah,
where there were people protecting statues.
yes,
Why would you purposely cause that standoff where there's only like 20 police protecting the counter protesters from a mob of Black Lives Matter? And you saw later on someone got jumped by Black Lives Matter people in Trafalgar Square because of that reason.
yeah. And yeah, Black Lives Matter again. They attacked people in Trafalgar Square who would just happen to be there. I don't think they had anything to do with the protests at all, but because they were, you know, looked like they could be, they in the wrong place at the wrong time, they would attack them, as well.
Yeah, and I think the media as well. They
And the,
were
well, yeah,
full force.
and this goes back to the what I put on the Discord not so long ago. Um, Sky News were reporting that the police in this country, she was reporting the other day, that black people in this country are dying at a disproportionate rate, um, at the hands of our police. Um, Now, this sounds like something you real copy and paste from the American news networks. But the reality is, last year, only one black person died at the hands of the police, and that was the terrorist who attacked, the that took place in December, who was shot dead by police, because that was the guy with the normal tusk and the fire extinguisher and the net and all that sort of stuff. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and the only black person to be killed at the hands of the police was that guy. And and then she had the and pure lie. Pure. I mean, you want to say what is your definition of fake news? That is, for me, that is the pure definition, of fake news in one. And what you have is, and a lot of senior officers have been saying this, that the media has been stoking up not just racial hatred but hatred against the police, on things which are complete bollocks, and like statistics like that. And like last couple of nights we've been seeing in London police officers being attacked and being chased out of areas from they claiming to be illegal raves and everything, but for me they look like just straight up riots. I mean, I don't know how else you can describe it.
yeah. When you're throwing bottles at police and they're running away from you, you can't call that an illegal rave. That's rioting. And what I didn't like either was the Met Police's response to this, Like they're saying we need to build relationships. How are you supposed to build relationships when they're throwing you out of their communities, chasing you out with bricks and bottles?
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Dialogue is all well and good, but there comes a point where you have to distinguish between the community and then just violent thugs. And you know, it seems that there seems to be this above the Met Police, this sword of like Damocles, if you were, hanging above them, where they are so frightened to interfere. Otherwise, the accusation of racism, the sword of racism, will come crashing down on top of them. That they will quite happily look the other way or just not interfere because and there are officers who have said that they know that if they do a stop and search or if they make an arrest and it's filmed and it appears to be violent, they know that when it comes down to it, their senior officers won't have their backs in a proceeding or a hearings case, and so they would rather just sit do nothing, because the risk to their careers and their pensions is far too great, because you have a situation where you have you have the mob rule on your social media, who determine they'll upload a clip, and the trouble is it could be edited, and then the media would grab the clip and they run away with it as well. And with the George Floyd, I mean, at work today, a lot of my colleagues were saying, well, the guy was a fucking criminal. I mean, let's not remember, the BBC and Sky had this ridiculous stream of his funeral, like 2 days of his funeral. I mean, the guy, what was he? He robbed a pregnant woman at gunpoint. He has a long history of being in and out of prison. He was a general scumbag, and to be honest, I couldn't give a flying fuck if that guy's life ended the way it did, because he's not somebody I would note as a loss to anyone.
Yeah, I don't understand why Black Lives Matter have chosen him out of if you're going to choose the figure behind your movement, why would you choose a criminal? But then again, there haven't been any killings that they can justify completely until now. But even then, we do not know if the police officer was racially motivated. We don't know if it was poor training. No
Yeah,
one knows his intentions.
we don't know the intentions. I mean, in the clip that I saw, while I mean, it's very disturbing because he is kneeling on the neck, blood does come out of his mouth at the end of it, and he dies, and it's very gruesome thing to watch. But at no point the police officer say any racial slurs or anything. I mean, I think. To be honest, and the people saying on Twitter the other day, "Oh, well, do you think that he would um, give the same treatment to a white person in that scenario?" And I'm saying, well, maybe maybe if they had a white working class person in Minneapolis who was pulling the same trick, I to be honest, I could see him doing the same thing as well. I don't see because he does have, like, he has, I think he had the officer in question, he had like 13 outstanding complaints against him.
Yeah, he had a history of being like overusing his force. He had a history of it.
Yeah, he had a history of it, and his that in on itself um should have but again, in this country, um police officers, you know usually after a couple, if a police officer has like I think it's like three uh complaints against them, um then y- um they usually have some sort of training or possibly even disciplinary procedures. So again, and this is the thing, because our police, we're a different country, in the United States, and I know that sounds like a obvious point to make, but it seems like it has to be made because there seems to be a lot of supposedly sensible people who cannot distinguish between the fact that you know
our government, our police, we don't have control of what happens in Minneapolis, and you know, and remember, these are Democrats in America. These are Democrats. These are the progressive left wing states which are producing all these like supposedly racist police. I
Yeah,
mean, like, this doesn't happen in your Alabamas and your Georgias and your Texas or anywhere. This is happening in you know your northern Democrat states.
yeah. I think it's another knock against their claim that the system is racist. How can you call the system racist when your guys are the city council, the mayor, the House of Representatives, the senators there, the governors? Like, you cannot claim that the system is racist when the system is your system. Just
Yeah,
because Trump is the president doesn't mean that he is the system.
well, I think it's safe to assume that the system locally is Democrat. It's been Democrat for over 100. It's been I think for nearly 100 years now. It's been Democrat run, both like state, congressional level, city level, police level, everything else. It's literally been Democrat through and through. Um, so I don't understand how you know any Republican or Trump in particular, as you said, can be held responsible for any of this. Um, and the funny thing is, we're going to because obviously from Minneapolis you've had the defunding of the police, and are you able to? Because you sound like you probably know a bit more about it than I do. Because I've heard about the city um, council have voted and passed the defunding of the police. But what does it mean? Are they actually going to abolish the police, or is it they're going to effectively rename it and reduce the powers of the police? How is that going to work?
I think they're pushing for like a community support for mental health. I think ultimately though they'll have community support and basically social workers for like smaller crimes. But then I think they're going to have to, like, if there's a murder on the loose in Minneapolis, a social worker isn't going to deal with that. So I think no matter how much they defund the police, they're still going to need people to deal with violent crime, serious crime. But even then, I don't think that social worker has the ability to deal with a domestic violence case or a drug case.
No, but it sounds like it's amazing because you'd have to be somebody who lives in such a privileged world that they are unaware of you know the effects that crime would have or lawlessness would have if you'd remove um, law and order from communities which suffer high gang problems. I mean, would have to live in such a privileged world to be completely unaware of the effect that you would have by doing that.
Yeah. And going back to Britain, Navarre Media were pushing for the same. I read an
Yes,
article by them. They're pushing for the same community workers. And it's like, I don't understand how they will think a community support worker will deal with domestic violence. Because domestic violence is a dangerous situation. Murders will come from domestic violence.
I think going well. The Marxist mindset has I've seen what I've been seeing on like especially on American social media, and I would assume that um, Navarra media are following the same sort of thought process. Is that violent crime is a product of living in a capitalist society. So I think for them, if their sort of idea is we defund the police, and then once we're in power, there will be no need for the police because no reason for people to commit crime because we live in the perfect society.
Yeah, most definitely. But they were also in that article. They linked it to austerity somehow, which is their. I've seen this a lot with Labour. they always claim austerity, austerity, austerity. But I don't understand how to deal with austerity. They're going to take funding away from a public sector. Like, I don't know how they can be against austerity, but then decrease public spending.
Well, I don't understand how central government reducing payments to local government, which then would be going into you know, libraries, would cause greater gang violence. I don't see the link, because the people who cause the violence are not the ones attending the places that would be affected, let's say, from quote unquote spending cuts, or spending reviews. They're not the people that are directly affected or directly would cause affection. I mean, you hear, like with Labour, that they go into community centres and such, and will say that, or if we only had more community centres, it would that would stop these young black kids and such from going into gangs, and then going out dealing, and going out stabbing, and then being at risk of being stabbed. But number one, you'd have to make sure they go there, because if I don't know anybody who would, if they got something better to do, how can you assure no one there be going there, or if they do go there? It seems like they're just sort of preaching to the already converted, because they're not really getting to the heart of the problem of those people, the people that you can't reach because they're so ingrained in the gang culture. And I think it really comes down to go back to the father's households, but actually having strong role models, but also discipline, because a lot of these kids are brought up without any discipline outside, from external forces, like from parents or teachers or such, and they have no self-discipline as well, and so they have no they don't really have like a moral compass to guide them through anything. They always look towards the gang and the gang leader.
Yeah, and I think it's been documented that there's a serious problem with refusal to cooperate with police in the black communities, which only perpetuates the problem, because the black community are teaching their children that the system is against them all the time. Instead of embracing the system, they need to, in a sense, play the game and let the state help them, instead of claiming that they're actively oppressing them when the figures don't show it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you take someone like David Lammy, now, he's an MP. He's been an MP for nearly 20 years now, because I think it's a North London seat. I think it's Hackney. Let's just see, David Lammy. No, sorry, he's a street. He's an MP for Tottenham. Now, he is the old. I mean, if there was a clone of Al Sharpton, he would be the one that I would say, yeah, that's definitely a clone. I mean, obviously he wants to be Al Sharpton. He wants to be the UK version of Al Sharpton. And every time, I mean, I've never heard Lammy actually talk about fiscal policy, or spending reviews, or anything you would hear from a politician. Like, everything he talks about is race baiting, race baiting, race baiting. It's absolutely everything that man talks about. And as I said, he's been MP for 20 years, and he's also been in like the Blair government as well. He's been in the Blair government. He was very much a Blairite in his day.
Yeah.
And his, this goes back to the thing, Democrat-controlled cities. Well, these are Labour-controlled councils, and the Labour-controlled London Assembly with a Labour-controlled mayor. And there's only so far. Well,
okay, if the system's against you, so that means Lammy and the Labour Party are against you. Because what other system? I mean, all powers are being devolved effectively. What the Conservatives outside of London are against you? I mean, well, how does that work? What power do they have over you? Because we always hear that there is this institutionalized racism. Well, where is it? Show me it.
Yeah.
I want to see the civil servant or the person who is enacting like white nationalist policies. Because I'll be fascinated. I'm just fascinated to see it. I'm just fascinated to see how they're going ahead with it. But I always hear it, but and it never gets questioned. Nobody ever like I've never. I think only Andrew Neil is the only person I can think of off the top of my head who sort of questioned Lammy over it, and Lammy. And when he did, Lammy did start backpedaling because he realised that he's full of shit, effectively.
Well, I think he's really missed the trick. If he really wants to help the black community, he could be a role model for them instead of telling them that they are hated for the color of their skin in British society. He
Yeah,
needs to talk about the opportunities he was given to get to where he is today. And he needs to motivate people within his own community instead of claiming that they're oppressed. He is the perfect success story, but he
yes,
doesn't use that platform, which is really disappointing. But then
yeah.
it's expected.
Well, I mean, the thing is, with Lammy, I don't know if because I've always wondered. I don't know if you have a particular view on this. Do you think he knows that he's talking absolute shite, or do you think he actually believes the stuff that he's saying?
I think he's smart enough to know. I think he knows that's his ticket. Because if he was to go and tell people in his constituency, you can become a success like I did, you can have that opportunity, you have the opportunity to succeed, the whole premise of the current Labour Party would be destroyed. Because him and the Labour Party are claiming that they need help to get lifted up when the help is already there. The doors are open for black people to get through. Like, you look at stuff now, black people are getting scholarships to go to university, but yet he still goes on about his narrative. I just think he's playing the game to stay in his seat. I
Yeah,
think he's too smart to not know it.
yeah.
But Diane Abbott, I'm not sure if she's smart enough to realise.
No, I mean, trouble is, when it comes to, I mean, Diane Abbott, she doesn't usually talk so much about race baiting politics, like on the same level as Lammy or Dawn Butler or anyone like that. She goes more down the line of your Corbynite sort of thing, where you talk about class and the economy. I mean, she has sort of said quite specifically, like, white people are racist and everything on Twitter, but and she had to delete it and backtrack and backpedal on all that one, on all that. But yeah, I think, yeah, I think Diane Abbott, I think she knows that it's not as simple as it seems. But she's also, I mean, she also said on Question Time that she was concerned that the sort of more increased, um, calling, this was during Brexit time, just after Brexit, the Brexiteers of Northern England as racist and racist gammons and all that. She was aware. She said that she referenced it, that we will just end up alienating our voter base, which they have, as we have seen in the last election. So she was aware of that. I think a lot of Labour MPs are aware of the problem, though they don't seem to address it. I think they believe that they can somehow still manipulate the public somehow, but they think they can do like a Blairite manipulation of, you know, having this, you know, the sort of public and private face. Though I
think
don't.
the current Labour Party they're too blatant, but I think we might see a shift back to that Blairite, especially with the sacking of Rebecca Long Bailey. I think that's deserves more attention than it's been given, because it's a big shift away. She's the biggest Corbynite that was in the party, and she just lost a lot of power.
Yeah, I think that is potentially probably a very important moment for Labour, but also momentum as well, because she was very much backed by momentum. And John Landsman, who's the head of Momentum and Novara Media and all that sort of the far leftists within the Labour Party. It'd be interesting to see how Keir Starmer will go forward when it comes to dealing with momentum. Though I don't believe that he has the willpower to really take them on properly. Not like Neil Kinnock did with Militant in the 80s. I don't think Keir Starmer's got that particular willpower to do so.
No, and I think some of his shadow cabinet is still that type of left.
Yeah, it's a very divided cabinet. And of course, one of the problems, going back, sort of linking this back in now, Momentum have said yesterday that they want to get their people on the national executive board to influence the Labour Party policies at like next elections, because the way they do it is for people who are listening who might not be aware, they have a body who are elected representatives on this board, and they get to basically pick up policies, present them, and vote on them, and pass them through this council, you could say. And the idea is meant to be all very democratic, but over the last several years, Corbyn and Corbyn supporters and Momentum have been infiltrating and basically getting them, entryism into the party, so they can elect those sorts of people onto the board to pass more leftist policies and undermine the Blairites in the party. And it'd be interesting to see at the next election, or the next manifesto, Labour manifesto, because if you have a situation where the majority of those people who decide the manifesto are Corbyn supporters, and you've got Keir Starmer, will Keir Starmer go along with what those on the National Executive Board say?
Yeah, because I could see a situation where he would easily get picked apart if his manifesto didn't fit his own beliefs. And that was it was like the last election. A lot of the Labour shadow cabinet at the time did not just want a second referendum where you could leave. They wanted to revoke Article 50. And it was so divided that I think it was the main reason that they lost, really. And you could see it happening again if Momentum influenced the manifesto enough.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Keir Starmer's going to have to come up against, because he will have a situation where he will be trying winning back those the people that who haven't voted for the Labour Party in the last couple of elections. I mean, the route to power for him, he would have to win all those seats that not just that Boris won, but also that Cameron won in 2010 and 15, plus, and this is where gets difficult for Labour Party, they would also need to win back a good portion of the SNP seats in Scotland,
which at this moment in time I don't see happening anytime soon. So take Scotland out the picture for the moment. Labour Party, if they wanted to win power, would have to win all those seats that they won effectively in 2005 plus plus 40, which include Jacob Rees-Mogg's seat in North and East North East Somerset, which if you again, I don't know how well you know that seat, but that went Labour in '97 by a very small margin when it was called the constituency of Wakefield. Though given its current boundaries, I don't see it going Labour really ever. To be honest, I don't see it happening. Not even not. I mean, I don't even know if Labour would come a close second at any point.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be similar to the Blair Project. It's going to take 10, 15 years.
But yeah, it's going to take a long time.
If Boris carries on being the wet Tory that he has been, then it's going to be easier for them. Because I don't think, other than Brexit, he hasn't proven to be what a lot of people thought he would be. I think he's been much softer than I imagined at first.
Yes, he has. I think with the coronavirus, I mean, I don't know if the coronavirus. I think if the coronavirus didn't happen, I think we would have a better understanding of what sort of prime minister he would be. Because we haven't, he was elected towards the end of December. He had sort of that honeymoon period, and then of course you just had coronavirus, and then that's been dominating for the last few months. And we haven't really seen. I mean, we heard like you had Dominic Cummings who was saying he wanted to move the civil service out of London and move it like to Grimsby or somewhere like that. He wanted to send it all over the place, and he wanted to like ban Oxford and like Cambridge students from entering the civil service and everything. So he was putting forward some interesting proposals. From what I understand from people inside the party and that the Conservative membership are really aware ever since the whole statues and the response to the policing. They're really aware of the domination of Marxist communist types in the media, in academia, and they're aware, and I'm hearing terms like the cathedral being passed around now within those conservative circles. So, and there are those in the cabinet that I hear who are talking to the Prime Minister regularly and Cummings and saying, and sort of going through this trying to instill this undermine the woke agenda. I think that's what was described as they want to undermine the woke agenda. So like when it came to this racial inclusion diversity board, they put Menina Minerva. I think I pronounced the name wrong, but she was a couple of weeks ago. And of course, if you see her on the Trigonometry podcast, she is a Asian woman of color, but she is effectively one of us. She very much engaged in the culture war, and she doesn't believe in this victimhood narrative at all. And of course, because now you got those on the left on Twitter calling her effectively an Uncle Tom, a traitor, and you got likes David Lammy and such absolutely fuming, saying that she's basically like apologist to racists and everything. So I don't know. I think the response to when it comes to policing and the response to the rioting and the violence and the criminal damage,
unfortunately, a lot of those decisions and a lot of the control of policing has been devolved to people like Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, I think we would have seen a stronger response if it was a Conservative mayor of London.
Yeah, and I think again, Bristol, of course, Bristol was run by Labour mayor, and the response, I think the response again would have been different if it happened, say, elsewhere in Somerset. Say if it happened, um, let's say like Taunton or somewhere like that, somewhere bit more conservative area in Somerset. I think the response there would have been different. So there is this, but then again, it wouldn't have happened. It would have happened only in your cities like Bristol or London and such, because that's where a lot of these activists dwell.
Yeah, I think the mayor as well of Bristol, he was very sympathetic to their cause. He didn't outright endorse it, but he implicitly was sort of happy that it had been torn down because
Yes.
it bothered him, even though he was already planning to change the statue plaque to include the fact that he was a slave trader.
Yes. And one of the problems that all these politicians are facing now is, of course, when you sanction or when you allow the rule of the mob, then you see, like the scenes a week later with the football lads, and then, violence on the streets. I mean, like in Bristol, other statues and plaques and other things have been attacked. Like there was an Afro-Caribbean woman's she was a poet, I believe, in the I think it was in the 60s or something, and somebody poured bleach all over the statue, and you've seen increase in vandalism and then violence. And personally, the person that should be held responsible is the mayor of Bristol, because he's allowed the rule of the mob, and so people have seen that and they've basically said, well, if you can do what the hell you like and destroy and vandalize property, then people who will go out and do it.
Yeah, I think they're playing a dangerous game, and it's shown through that vandalism of the Afro-Caribbean statue. And also, I think there was a grave in Bristol of a prominent member. I don't know exactly what their name was, but it was a prominent member of the Afro-Caribbean community.
Yeah.
In Bristol, they vandalized their grave, and it just shows when you play these dangerous games, you're going to get even worse, like outlashes from like the dangerous people in society. Like if you push people far enough, they'll become more radical themselves.
Well, that's why you can't control the mob. I mean, you can look at any sort of mob, let's say event or occurrence in history. The politicians who've tried to control it. I mean, the French Revolution is a perfect example. The people that tried to who created the revolution and tried to control the mob all end up getting chopped. Basically, they had the chopped experience, the guillotine, and one I think Sargon was talking about it not so long ago in one of his streams. The problem is those that take part in the revolution very rarely see the end of it.
Yeah.
And so the mayor of Bristol. I mean, I think he's opened up a can of worms, which effectively, even the Somerset Police and Mayor of Bristol have basically said it's okay for criminal vandalism and basically mob violence is acceptable. And so now when you have criminal vandalism and violence, then I don't know how they could then turn around and say, no, you can't, and that's not allowed. And I think that's what they're aware of at the moment, because I've noticed that the mayor of Bristol has sort of backpedaled on some of the protests, like future protests and such. So I think he is aware that he cannot control. If he allows this sort of mob rule, it's going to come back and bite him quite badly. I know at the moment Bristol, they got Extinction Rebellion have sort of reared their heads again, and they've sort of taken to city council roof, and they're and doing their protests on there. So um, I think there are those who are more aware.
Yeah, I think no matter how much the mayor of Bristol may agree with the cause, I think he must realise that rule of law needs to be enforced. And if he keeps letting rule of law slip, he'll lose it entirely.
Yeah, and I said to you, you guys in on your Discord chat the other day, I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in Stokes Croft, a situation like Seattle where you have like a Chaz or Chaz Chop or whatever they call themselves occurring in Stokes Croft, where you have basically like a their own like enclave forming, and they would form it, and and then everything would go down from hill there from there, because it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, they
And
already have you. Did you see when they rioted because they wanted to build a Tesco in Stokes Croft? Because
yes,
they're against
I am
big
aware of that.
corporations.
Yeah, that, and they rioted for a couple of nights, and it 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 sort of, well, because they said it would cause harm to community, and then they end up like smashing shops, like other shops in the community. So I don't know what, I mean. Either I'm From what I could see, the only people, if you smash up like other shops, like competitors of Tesco's, then either they must have been like pro Tesco rioters in the crowd.
But no, it just shows something as simple as that could spark something off if this same rhetoric that is being used in the US keeps getting transferred to the UK.
Yeah, and it's been transferred via the universities, and
Yeah,
that,
most definitely.
and that's the problem. I mean, when it comes to the universities, I don't know what you can do with them. I think the only thing that I would be government wise that they could do is they could withhold funding. That would be the like an immediate response would be. I mean, like for Cambridge at the moment, I think Boris has a good, and I think he. Now, I just need to check, because I think he may have talked about withholding funding to universities recently, or cutting funding to universities. Um,
I think they need to enhance the apprenticeship market more, because the biggest red pill is experience working.
yeah, I
And
mean
it's
the best.
undeniable.
No, I think the best way to remove those sort of indoctrinations that you get at university is when you enter the world of work, and then you realize that actually no, Vosh, a person like Vosh and his worldview of working for you don't work for a company. It's basically it's all slave labor. If you don't have a stake in the company, it's like, no, Vosh, it's not slave labor, because you join it with a contractual agreement. Because when every time you hence why you have job interviews, hence why you have to sign and agree that you're working, and then you get put on something like probation, and then from probation you get your work, your rights as an employee and such.
And and that's the thing that it comes down to is, yes, working in the real world is the best way to unravel the narrative, but that's the thing. You need to get a situation where the universities, you have to sort of get them to be in the real world, and you have to get it so that they have more contact with the real world. Now, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, I follow a chap called I think it's Vanishing Point.
I haven't heard of them, no.
He's a chap on Twitter, and he's sort of within the academic agent Sargon sort of community of followers like myself. And he was engaged with this debate where basically he was talking about I think it was probably what we were talking about, uh, sort of Labour Party, Conservative Party, national politics, that sort of stuff. And he was debating with this individual who was a mature student at Oxford, and obviously the Vanishing Point managed to get him on a point because this Oxford child, as I would say, because he's the mentality of a child, response was, "Well, I've got a PhD at Oxford. Have you been to Oxford?" And he was, "No." We said, "Well, there you go. You don't know anything." And I'm not joking. That's basically what he put. And so, level of arrogance from these people is amazing. And there definitely seems to be this like you see with like actors, like when they get pulled over by police, and like, "Don't you know who I am?" sort of thing.
Yeah, it seems like the academics and the journalists have reached their own class. They're above people in their view
Well,
because of their profession.
They want privileges.
Yeah.
They believe they deserve privileges, and that they should be. It's a sort of, don't you dare question us, you pathetic little plebs. And then they're the same people that would go out and say, "Oh, well, we're true Labour Party supporters," and it's, they're the same, but they pretty much they're larpers conservatives, but they behave as like the high Tories from the 17th century. um, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people. I think it's why Labour are not in power today.
Yeah, I think they've lost the pulse, and they've
Yeah.
lost it for many years now. But I definitely think the universities are responsible for the Black Lives Matter protests in the UK. I wouldn't be surprised if many of the people that the police are looking for taking down the Colston statue are uni students at Bristol.
Well, see, I don't believe that the police don't know who these people are. I've already heard, now there's a rumor going around, this is on Twitter, but so it possibly may not be true, though I cannot confirm nor deny the validity of this statement. But they claim that one of the people who brought down the statues was also the same person that confronted Jacob Rees-Mogg at a talk, I think at the University of West of England, and basically tried to throw a punch at him. And there was a name going around which I'm not going to say because I don't know if he was involved with it. But again, he's a mature student. He's like in his 30s, mid 30s, never grown up, still living off, I imagine, parents' money, because I don't know how else he can afford to, live and fight the urban revolution that he's fighting. And of course, they all live. They're banned in the People's Republic of Stokescroft, and as I said, they're trying to deliver the revolution from there. So, and these are very clear photos. The photos that the Avon and Somerset were putting out there, they weren't like grainy sort of dodgy photos you get at like a evening nighttime event. This was pure daytime, and some of these photos are like front on, like you could see quite clearly the detail on the faces of the men and women there.
Yeah, I'm surprised that I haven't found them all, because it's so clear. and the amount of clips. There's so many clips of people tearing it down.
Yeah.
It's not like an isolated event.
No, and this goes back to the final point I'd probably say with the war on the police is the biggest enemy of the police is the police itself. And it seems that a lot of senior officers have been sort of cozying up to the cultural, liberal leftist elite in this country. And, from where I'm sitting, it almost seems that they're working in cahoots with them.
Yeah, because when you look at the PCCs, they're elected officials, aren't they?
Yeah.
So their job depends on cozying up to the cathedral.
Yes. And for chief inspectors in the police force, and your people like your Cressida Dix and everything, they are appointed by those same people. So they had to keep their jobs. They again have to cozy up, which means you get instances where officers are told that they have to behave this way when they're dealing with X person, or don't interfere or intervene with this mob that's tearing down and causing criminal damage. And then the police force basically becomes, like, it goes from policing to basically another propaganda wing of the movement. I mean, it seems that the police are more happy to be like a protection force for those people against, and this goes back to the rioting that we saw in London, where they were very happy to go against the Patriots and the football hooligan lots and the veterans than they were to go against the other side. And again, so like if in Bristol there was a riot of football hooligans who were out to destroy a statue of whoever, I think that number one, I think the police would be there. I think you would have full riot gear. I think you'd have mounted horses, police dogs, and everything else.
Most definitely, and the media would have a field day with it. It
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be pictured as violent.
yeah, you would have all the Labour councillors, Labour mayor, Labour MPs all out saying how disgraceful this was. We need to pass legislation now and they'll be pushing for legislation to be passed. And this to me, I think, is given the violence, Boris Johnson did pass legislation, I think only a week ago, against allowing protests to continue under the guise of the coronavirus, are more than 6 people. Yet yesterday, I was seeing on Twitter that Northampton police were saying that they were going to basically be at a Black Lives Matter vigil to protect and arrest counter-protesters. Now, again, you got a situation where the government is passing legislation on policing, and then you got police who are basically turning around and saying, well, actually, no, we're going to do what we want. And that can't be right. That cannot continue. And so I think the government needs to. I think the government number one needs to take powers from local authorities and local mayors of policing. I think policing should be centralised again under the control of government or maybe an independent board of police. And then they need to pretty much sack police PR teams. They need to get rid of the PR, and those police officers who express political opinions should be also given the boot, and then recruit from the ranks.
Yeah, I think the seeds of this were planted when Blair was in power, when he
Yeah.
gave all this power to the local authorities, devolution, Greater London Assembly, city mayors. So they just needed an event like this for them to flex the power that they have.
Yeah. I mean, every Conservative administration, government, Prime Minister, Cameron, May and Boris, and probably that if it isn't sorted under Boris, then ones in the future will be faced with this problem where they will have to live with Blairite institutions, Blairite policies, but also Blairite individuals, say in the civil service, who will be there constantly undermining everything you do. Now, depending on how they want to go forward, there, it should be the job. If maybe Boris, obviously he may be, depends if he is busy as such, but he get somebody, maybe like, someone like Priti Patel or someone to start looking and seeing how you can basically root out the Blairite society and culture within the institutions, either through reforms where you can sort of wheel them out, or by, I don't know if, because with like direct sacking is then it has to go through industrial tribunals and everything, and it gets like a long and complex and mess. So
it's too loud of an approach.
Yeah, you equally, if you wanted to do like the opposite, you would have to do it like the way that Blair did it, where you have to set the seeds and let it take time to grow. So again, if Boris wants to do something, it won't be like an immediate effect, but later down the road, you would see if it had any success to root out like the leftists and the Blairites and sort of the woke policies. I mean, I think the one thing he could do, like with the BBC is obviously the easiest target that you can have. I think at this stage, I have no love, no anything attached with the BBC. The only thing is I have to pay my TV license fee. That's the only thing that I have to attach with, and I don't want it because at this stage that every time if you go on the BBC website today, it's basically like a BuzzFeed article 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you go down, and so first one of the first is you got like the campaign to put more pounds into black-owned businesses, and then you go down and even further, and then you see like the Neil and then you got like promotion of child pop stars and everything, and it's just it's sort of like and then got like Stormzy and everything. Talk about Glastonbury experience, you got Stormzy in it. It's just like the complete bloody ashes of society that they're putting out there daily.
But no, I think there is a growing lobby to defund the BBC, and I think to really appeal to his base, I could see Boris doing that.
Yeah.
In the next year, really.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to do that because, especially with the Dominic Cummings incidents and everything, and the blatant bias that the BBC had because, you had that Emily Matthias, is it Matthias Mattis? Emily Matthias?
Yeah, Matthias.
He went, he was on the it was Newsnight, and she basically said, oh, he's a proven liar. We all know this, and yet government couldn't see it. And obviously, it's quite clear in the BBC guides that they're not meant to express their own personal opinions, and yet it's done on a daily basis. And she just did it very blatantly. And again, the BBC, it's because it's funded by the public. It's not designed in any way to to behave like I guess like you could say like Sky or ITV, because obviously with Sky and ITV we don't have to pay to view them. You can just choose not to watch it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I explained to a lot of Americans when I've been talking about the license fee is that it's not like you can say saying don't watch it. Well, that's fine, but that's not the point. Even if I spent like all my time using a TV to play like video games or something, you still have to pay the BBC for that right for a television. Especially when you want to watch like terrestrial channels. Say if you were just going to watch say Channel 4 or Channel 5 or History Channel,
you still have to pay. And then the excuse is, oh well, you can use like streaming services, and it's like, well, I don't have good internet where I live. We don't all live in fucking metropolitan cities with perfect internet connection.
But no, I think the BBC days are numbered for sure.
Yeah, especially I have a lot of respect for Cummins because that move about the breaking of the lockdown rules, that press conference he did, he chose to do that to undermine the media,
Oh,
and it showed them, and he
yeah.
loved it.
Oh, I know. That was pure power. That was him basically flexing his power right to them. I mean, basically doing it in the garden on a very hot day, keeping them waiting to get all hot and then stuffy. And he sort of made them walk up one by one while he's just sitting there drinking. And then obviously they weren't allowed. So he was able to establish that he gets to sit at a table with a glass of water. They have to stand and wait for him. So he's already establishing the power dynamic. And then they walk up one by one. At that point, they're all really cross, and he's just sitting there, and he's like, "No." And they're all basically they all wanted to. Is like, "Will you apologize? Will you apologize?" And he's like, "No, I'm not apologizing." And that's the key, because I mean, I've always said that if I properly go into politics, and you know, one of the things that you should never do, that I've seen a lot of conservatives do and a lot of other politicians in general do, is when they say something they generally believe and then it's being classed as controversial or outspoken, and then they sort of get the media pressure to apologize. But I don't know who you apologize to. I mean, who are you apologizing to?
Yeah, I think was it Beth Rigby who said, "Will you apologise to the families who've lost lives and haven't been able to see their relatives in hospitals?"
Yeah,
What has that
and
got to do with Dominic Cummings?
well, I think that's what he said. No, because he did not have he wasn't like coughing on the families' faces, giving them coronavirus. I mean, if he went to a hospital and like coughed in the face of families and people, gave them coronavirus, maybe you could argue he caused their deaths. But unless that, no, Beth, you're full of shit. Get the fuck out. No, seriously. it, she, I mean, Beth Rigby, and this is the thing. I mean, if you see how the journalists they treat each other. I mean, there's a scene. I'm just going to go find. I'll put it in the chat actually of Adam Bolton, and it was at the. It was I think it was at the Labour. It might be Labour or Conservative Party conference, and he basically just let rip at Beth Rigby because she was meant to sit down for like a segment, and she wasn't like doing it. She was taking too long, and he just basically told her to do, "Oh, sit your fucking backside down here, woman," or something like that. He really let rip it. I'll post it in the chat, and so that people can see. But yeah, he absolutely let rip at her, and um, and the trouble is, she's meant to be, this, strong female journalist, and she didn't even say anything to him. Like, and it's not like he's not like her boss or producer or anything. He's just like he's an equal, effectively. And he basically spoke to her like some bloody, assistant, like grade one assistant, and she just like sat there and was like, she took it, and it's like, really? I mean, you're meant to come across as like these strong figures, political figures, and you just like sat there and took it. I mean, if he said that to me, I'd tell the fat cunt to go stick it. I mean, I wouldn't take that from him.
Yeah, I think just to go back to the war on the police topic, I think the
Yeah,
media are complicit in this completely, 100%. And I do feel for the individual police officers because they must. I do not know how they would want to continue their job when they're seeing their fellow officers getting injured and nothing being done about it.
yeah, and they can't go on strike. They can't. They don't have those sorts of right. The only thing they could do is resign en masse, but then they're out of a job as well, and so there's nothing they can do. Um, the only thing that they could do is you got the police federation, and the more the police federation representatives do the rounds on television, the more that they can criticize the media for how they've been portraying the Black Lives Matter and the media response to that. But no, I mean, and this is the thing, like, the increase in violence against police officers in this country has been very staggering over the last couple of months. I mean, of course, you had the rioting where you had 26 officers, and then of course you had, I think it was like 14 officers on the second week, and then over the last couple of days, you've had the supposed street parties and illegal street gatherings in London, where now over 140 officers have been injured. And then, of course, yesterday you had the attack in Glasgow, which we've been told is not terrorist related. So any leftist that wants to go and say, "Oh, hang on a sec, this is a terrorist thing, so it's not different," well, no, it's all we've already been told that this is a non-terror related. So we'll class this as well, where a police officer again has been stabbed, and how far are we going to go before a police officer or multiple police officers are going to be killed on the streets?
Yeah. That's what happens when we import the ideas of the US, which are not caring for police.
The all cops are bastards sort of things you've seen, because I've seen, like, in Bristol as well, I've seen like that being sprayed, like ACAB, which is basically the abbreviation of all cops are bastards.
Yeah, I can't see any reason for it, especially in Bristol. There's not been racial tensions in years in Bristol.
Well, the police seem to be on the side of those people. They don't. Again, are you same with the Met Police? I mean, they're very diverse. I mean, again, I don't see any evidence of any sort of dissent against the cathedral narrative. So I don't know what their problem is.
They're pushing an open door, really, and
Yes.
they feel like they are the revolution when they are backing up the system that they claim to hate. They're just strengthening it.
Yes. I think the only thing now is that there was I think there's been opinion polls done of Met officers, like your constables and such, your on the ground officers, your beat officers, and there's been a very, I think what probably you could say a stark change is a lot of them are a bit more have very negative views on the Black Lives Matter protest. I think it's like 80%, which is a lot higher than I thought it would be, have negative views on it in the Met Police. The overwhelming percent do not believe that the police are anyway like institution. And this thing is, you hear a lot of things about institutional racism and everything in the police force. A lot of people who say it don't understand what they mean by institutional racism. Institutional racism means that from Cressida Dick down into the senior ranks of the police force is a level of complacency where they are either racist themselves or they encourage a racist culture. But what we see with, we have seen with, I guess you could say, police officers in this country, when you have seen racism, it's not been institutionalized. It's usually down to the individual officer if they said something or done something which may indicate that they could be racist or acted improperly. And so we hear this term institutional racism being pushed around by other people who again don't seem to understand what the phrase means.
Yeah. I especially don't understand why the police are kneeling. I've seen those images when they're actively being hated. Why would you kneel for the person you hate, for the person that hates you? I think by kneeling, they're admitting that there is a problem with racism when they should know themselves from their own experience in the police force that there isn't an issue of racism.
I think it's that, and I think it's also a level of appeasement. I think because they're so frightened of this effect, because this is not just your standard gang that you get out of like East or South London. This is a black identitarian group movement, and they're fully aware of that. So everything they do, even if they're probably more worried that if they even grab one of them and try and make an arrest, that the media and people will just film it on their smartphones and everything, and then and they kill. Of course, this is the thing. A lot of these officers, they don't wear face coverings or disguise who they are. They have their names on the side, so they will be also. I mean, I know that a lot of officers who've been saying that they've been so concerned when they go to these places, because if someone films them, they don't want them trying to track them down and find out where they live or where they and then where their family is. And of course, a lot of them don't feel that even if they did make sit an arrest on one of these people, that their senior officers would support them if there were accusations of brutality or racism, that they'd be chucked under the bus.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen anyone get arrested for the attacks in London,
No.
but I saw arrests for the football lads, which is a
Yeah.
bit. It just shows how they've changed the rules depending on who's protesting. Because I'd argue Black Lives Matter have done a lot worse. Like that week when the counter protesters were there, one of them got stabbed in the neck and died.
Yeah, I mean it's safe to say that the violence, the majority of the violence is from the Black Lives Matter side. I think it when it comes to like those numbers who have been injured by the police who've been injured, it pretty much tells itself that the Black Lives Matter, even um and the effects, because of course these last couple of days where you've had your street parties, while a lot of people are saying, well, this isn't really Black Lives Matter, well, it is, because it's the effects of Black Lives Matter, because those same people that attended the demonstrations are also the same people who were going to these illegal street parties in Brixton and places like that.
Yeah, and the police are. There's a reason the police are afraid to go in and clear them out.
Yeah.
Which is the heightened racial tension that the Black Lives Matter protests have caused. They don't want to be accused of being racist. They don't want their lives ruined. So that's why these street parties are allowed to happen.
Yeah, and then of course you see the disgraceful footages of. I mean, I've seen, of course, like in the first week of the protest, we saw the police running from the Black Lives Matter down Whitehall, and then yesterday there was footage of police running out of Brixton, and I know that there were some who said, well, there were tactical decisions on the ground because they need a better vantage point, but for me, there should never be in a case where police officers, especially a good number of police officers who are formed in a line, should ever run, even if they're when it comes to numbers. Because when you're a police, when you got a baton and you start swinging, you there is you always see, no matter which country, you always see the crowds, because the crowds, they always go there. The rioters are always cowards, and they always look for people weak enough that they can hurt. If you stand your ground and you end up forming a very strong defensive line with batons, the crowds will not come near you because they would be too frightened to basically get hit and hurt. And I think that the scenes of police officers running, I don't know if it's because they're running because they've been ordered to. I think some of it they were being ordered to, and if they've been ordered to, then that's terrible in on itself. But there should be no excuse for police officers running, especially out of a borough. And that for me is that should be the main news story of all, that police officers were seen running out of a borough, and then anarchy was allowed to ensue. Because you think about this is the optics and the messages that this sends out. If you see on 9 o'clock news police running out of, because I remember back in 2011 when you had the rioting across England as a whole, that was the catalyst for the rioting to spread across London and the rest of the country, was the narrative the media put out saying the police were heavily
there wasn't enough police numbers to control the crowds and control the rioters, and then that just encouraged even more people, more criminals to come out, and opportunities to start rioting, looting, and everything else.
Yeah, most definitely. I think the police definitely need to have a stronger response, because even in the aftermath, they're saying, well, most of the parties that we dismissed were peaceful.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be defending them. They need
But
to be on the attack.
Yeah, and the majority of police officers know that this isn't right, and they know that their leadership is, deeply flawed. And the sad thing is, the leadership, if a police officer does die because of this, because of these rioting and because of these violence, because all it takes is a brick to be thrown at police. Because again, one of the reasons why a police officer should never run is they weren't wearing any hard helmets. Now, if you've got your back turned and a brick comes flying at you and hits you in the back of the head, that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
There's no, and that's one of the reasons. Because there was a former police officer on talk radio talking to Julie Bartley Brewer, and he stated that there's another reason why police officers shouldn't run and why they should hold their ground. And if effectively the senior police officers, if they are behind all this when it comes to the orders and not giving them proper equipment to go into these situations because of the risk of inflaming tensions, well, they could be condemning an officer to dying unnecessarily because of these appeasement policies.
Yeah, just being failed by all of the institutions, and the war on the police at the moment is coming from within the higher ups of the police as well. It's not just the Black Lives Matter movement.
No, it isn't, and the police, this sort of level of appeasement has been going on since probably, as you said, like the Blair time, and it got worse after the 2011 riots. I think because even back then, I remember the police did actually, the police officer and the police commissioner then, which were Sir Hogan Howe, he wasn't having any of it, and he sent in the police, and they they would charge the crowd. You didn't see much of police officers running away, and if they did retreat, then they did retreat backwards. They definitely wouldn't turn their backs and run. They would sort of just walk backwards to a point where they could, again, for tactical reasons. But no, I think. I think what we're going to have in this soon, especially coming up to summer, I think you're going to see mass civil disorder in London like you did in 2011, but I think it's going to be worse.
Yeah, I think the lockdown will definitely fuel it more, because even though it's starting to get eased, it's still not fully there, and people have got that pent up frustration for the last like 3 months. So it's only going to make the situation worse.
Yeah, and especially with Black Lives Matter and Antifa and everything else inflaming, and along with the media inflaming public opinion, it definitely seems they're gearing up for the perfect storm and everything.
Yeah.
I think. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot today.
We have covered quite a lot actually. Yeah, I think we covered all of it really. And as I said, yesterday's attack on the police. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. sorry, I tried to. I'm muting myself, and then I think I muted you by mistake as well. Sorry, I was just going to say, rounding all this up, I think, the war on the police is something that's been definitely perpetuated by the academics and the media, and it's sort of just spreading out from there.
Yeah,
and
I think they see the opportunity in the chaos that's brought to America. Like, if you look at how much it stirred up the election,
yeah,
that they're seeing that opportunity, and I think the cathedral in the UK want to replicate that.
yes,
But I don't think it will be as successful because the situation with the Conservative government at the moment is a lot more stable, whereas in America it's election year.
yeah, and I think the war on the police by Navarro media and the Black Lives Matter, they've played their hand too early, and I think public opinion has definitely gone against them over recent time.
Yeah, and I think it's mobilized, like the football lads mobilized. They're not normally political, but because they've come for the statues, I think it's mobilized a lot more people that wouldn't have caught on to the fact that there is institutions actively working against our society, trying to tear it apart.
Yeah, and so I think that's I think because there are people willing to stand up to them, they don't know really what to do from now on when it comes to that. I think there's been a lot of backpedaling from the Black Lives Matter side. They've sort of cancelled protests a bit here and there. So I think they're going back into their back into the bottle a bit.
Yeah, can only hope that they get shouted out of this.
Yeah. Anyway, professional reality. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right. This stream again, it's going to be up on the channel, and there's a lot of people who've been saying we got a few people been saying that they haven't been able to view it in full, but they'll be watching it later, so it's going to be all up there. And thank you very much, and we'll end it here, and we'll see you probably all next week. We'll try and continue with the history and civilization series. But until then, have a good weekend, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.